Real estate investing is not one size fits all. There are a lot of ways to start and make money within the realm of real estate investing, and I've been documenting my entire investing journey on this channel from my very first day driving for dollars to nearly missing $1 million hazards on a 33-unit apartment complex. I've tried and researched wholesaling, Airbnb arbitrage, the BRRRR method, commercial deals, and more. And so today, I want to use that experience and give you an honest look at what it might take to make $10,000 with each of these strategies. We'll consider how much experience you need, the startup costs involved, and how long it might take to get to that $10,000 mark, and the risk that you'll have to deal with in order to get there. Some people will tell you that real estate investing is easy and that there are 100% no risk strategies out there. You should just go and do it. But I want to be honest with you, it's not easy. But if you learn what to look out for, and if you approach it and educate yourself in the right way, it is possible, and I want to help you get there. So let's dive in. We'll compare 7 different ways that you could get involved in real estate, and we're starting with wholesaling. I'll use this little yellow squiggle to mean that there is a moderate amount of experience that is needed to wholesale. A lot of times people will say no experience, no money, no risk as a way to get you interested in wholesaling. And I agree that that's also what appealed to me about it. But as I got into it, I realized that wholesalers are really just professional deal finders. And in my opinion, one of the hardest parts of real estate is finding deals. And so while you don't need the experience or the capital to pull off something like a full fix and flip when you're wholesaling, you do still need a certain amount of experience in how real estate in general works, as well as how to find good deals, how to negotiate them, how to deal with contracts, how to communicate with cash buyers. You need to know the laws about investing in your area. It's not just start from day one and you'll find success without putting any work in. In fact, I would say it's a similar amount of work needed if you wanted to do something like Airbnb arbitrage, which is when you go to the owner of a property and with their permission, you pay them their monthly rent, but you furnish the property yourself and put it on Airbnb, and anything you make from Airbnb on top of the rent is yours to keep. Again, it's super important that you do this with the permission of the homeowner, and a lot of times people will go to apartment complexes and get permission to do it for a couple of the units. It helps the apartment complex to keep down on vacancies because they at least know that they're getting the rent from you, and apartment buildings are oftentimes really good Airbnbs. But you are signing a lease and agreeing to pay a certain amount of rent. And so the experience needed both in setting up an Airbnb, but then also running it and marketing it successfully, I would say is also about moderate. Then you've got house flipping, or what some people call fix and flipping. And I would say from an experience standpoint, this is probably one of the most difficult things that you could do. And I would also put the BRRRR strategy in here as well. Because when you're taking a distressed property and you're trying to fix it up, get it back into livable condition, get a bank to verify that that property is in livable condition and worth what you think it is, that is a lot of responsibility. Whether you sell that property when you're done or you refinance it and keep it as a rental, that renovation period takes a lot of experience. Not only do you need to know what needs to be done, but you also need to be a good manager of people because you're likely going to be working with contractors. You may also be working with city inspectors. There's just a lot more moving pieces. And so it's not to say that you can't dive in right away and start with a strategy like fix and flipping or BRRRR. It's just that the level of preparation that you're going to need to do is going to be higher. And so you might want to work for another fix and flipper in your area for a little while, or if you have experience in construction and you already know some of the ins and outs, that could be helpful. But it's not something that you want to go into with your eyes closed.
This video is brought to you by March Madness. And even though for most of my life that meant basketball, this month it means pickleball, and it means a huge discount for you on Ballpoint Marketing mailers. For a limited amount of time during March Madness, they're running a Mail Madness promotion where you can get a huge discount on any direct mail that you order. I'll put a link for you to get it below in the description. Back to the video while I go play some pickleball.
Now for this one, I debated between whether I wanted to put owning rental properties as a moderate level of experience needed or a high level. And to be honest, I'm deciding right now, I'm gonna go with moderate. The reason I'm so on the fence is because fix and flipping a house is difficult, but Managing a house that other human beings live in is difficult in a different way. I could tell you guys some horror stories from the things that I've seen after tenants move out. People live in very different ways, and what you might think is common sense to do or not to do in a property is common sense ain't common. And it's hard not to get emotionally attached to a property that you put your time, your money, and your effort into getting into livable condition, and then you rent it out to someone. They aren't going to treat it in as good of a way that you probably would. There's also different state laws that require different things from landlords. So stepping in to manage rentals, while I do think it is a little bit easier than fix and flipping or burr investing, it's still relatively difficult. I got my start with my first rental property by house hacking, which is where you buy a multifamily property or you buy a property with multiple rooms and you rent out the extra space or the extra units. And that was a little bit easier because I live on the property and my tenants were just next door. And so I had a little bit more of an oversight of what was going on. That did make it easier. So it really depends on the property type and how involved you're going to be. Are you going to be living there like a house hacker, or are you going to be across the country trying to manage it remotely? Bird dogging and cold calling are both things that I actually consider kind of side hustles as ways to get involved in real estate and to start learning. Bird dogging is basically when you drive around your market, called driving for dollars, and you log different properties that investors might be interested in. And sometimes there are people who do this on their own, and then after the fact, they try to sell that list of leads. But then there's also people who have a predetermined relationship with a real estate investor, and they might say, hey, I'll pay you X dollars an hour to go log properties. I'll pay you X dollars per property that you log. They might set it up where you log properties. If I buy any of the ones that you log, I'll pay you X dollars. There's a lot of ways to set it up, but the idea is that you don't need a lot of experience for this or for cold calling, because you are really just focusing on one skill and it's a very repeatable skill. So you're driving, you're learning to recognize the different properties, or you're cold calling, you're learning to talk to people, you're learning how to operate a script and ask the right questions. But it's pretty easy to get started with because the barrier to entry is low and the task that you're doing is very repeatable. So once you got it, you got it. Next, we've got becoming a real estate agent. And this is different than being a real estate investor. One of my mentors gave me the analogy that a real estate investor is oftentimes like a car mechanic, right? They are in the nitty-gritty of what's going on with the actual pieces of the house or pieces of the car. Whereas a real estate agent is more like the salesperson or the dealership owner, where they understand the marketing and they understand maybe the market value and the competition and things of that nature. That's not to say that one is better than the other or that you can't do both. I know a lot of people who got into real estate investing by first getting their real estate agent license. And that's why I have this as a medium level of experience needed, because you do need to get licensed to become a real estate agent. So you have to take a certain set of classes and pass a certain set of tests depending on what state you're in, but they're not excessively hard. And if you're willing to put the time in, and if this is something you want to make money in, I don't think it's too high of a barrier to entry for you to get started with. So now that you know the experience, let's talk about the startup costs associated with these different strategies. If any of these strategies are appealing to you, I've got a freebie pack down below that you can go get that will help you with whatever path you decide to take. It's got some scripts for talking to agents. It's got a PDF that will help you build out your business plan. All in all, it's a great way to help you get started and take action, and it's free, so you can go grab it in the description below. Wholesaling can be very low. So when I wholesaled my first deal, I really didn't put much into it because I found a distressed property that was sitting on market for months. No one was going after it, and I got permission from the real estate agent to wholesale it. Because it was on market, I didn't have to do any marketing to find it, and because I was wholesaling it, I didn't have to put any money down other than $500 of earnest money. And that deal made me $6,500, so that $500 in comparison was nothing. I think this is the main reason that wholesaling appeals to a lot of people, because it is one of the lowest startup cost requirements for many of these strategies. With Airbnb arbitrage, you do have to furnish the property. And so if you have a bunch of furniture that you can already put in there, it might be low. And then depending on the size of the property, if it's a studio apartment, that's going to be cheaper to furnish than if it's a 5-bedroom vacation rental. It all just depends, but it can get up there. With house flipping and rentals, the startup cost can also get up there because you need to purchase the property property. Even if you're getting a loan, it's very rare that you're going to get 100% of the money that's needed to buy and then also potentially renovate the property. And so if you have a lot of savings, or if you are partnering with someone who has the money, they might not be as much of a barrier to you, but there is a higher cost than with the other strategies. Bird dogging and cold calling, these are actually super cheap, especially if you're working with someone who you're going to be doing this for, logging properties or making calls. You might be able to get started for $0 because they'll provide the things that you need. I will say though, with bird dogging, you're going to need a car as well as gas, but again, relatively cheap in comparison to the money that you could make. Every state has different costs to become a real estate agent, so you'll just have to look in your state, but this is relatively cheap to moderate as the startup costs. All right, the last two. Most people talk about the experience and the money to get into real estate, but they often fail to give a realistic look at the timeline it'll actually take to start making money, as well as the risk along the way. In terms of speed, wholesaling is a really great opportunity. You could probably make $10,000 in your first year of it. It took me about 3 months of documenting here on YouTube and making dozens of offers to get that first deal, which I made $6,500 on. My next deal was $8,000, and that came about a month later. And so really within my first 6 months, I had made well over $10,000 from wholesaling. With Airbnb arbitrage though, you're not going to be getting paid in those big lump sums. Instead, you're going to be paying rent out. So let's imagine you pay $1,500 of rent out to the homeowner, and then your Airbnb that month brings in $2,500. Well, you just made $1,000, but you'll also probably have costs. You'll have things you'll want to set aside for. And so while you'll be probably making more money each month, which is more consistent than wholesaling potentially, the amounts are likely going to be smaller. And I would imagine that to get to that $10,000 mark, depending on what your rent is, what your costs are, and what you make from Airbnb, it'll probably take you a little bit more than a year. With house flipping, even though the startup costs and the experience needed are high, because you are selling such a big asset, the path to making $10,000, you'll probably make on your first successful deal. And most renovations are 3 to 5 months. So from the time that you do actually get started flipping a house to the time that you'll make $10,000 or more, that's probably relatively short. Rentals are going to follow a similar path as Airbnb arbitrage, because you'll have to pay your mortgage, you'll have to pay your taxes, your insurance, and you'll have to set aside for your different expenses. And so my aim is really $300 to $500 of cash flow per door each month. And so in order to get to the $10,000 mark with a rental, it's going to take some time. It's going to take months that get added up on top of each other. That said, that money is relatively passive once you get the tenant in there, and as long as they're a good tenant. And so there's the trade-off between the active income from something like house flipping and then the passive income from something like owning a rental. With bird dogging and cold calling, this is an interesting one because you are not really in control of when deals close. You are providing leads. So if the person that you're giving those leads to is really good and they close those deals quickly and they give you a significant payment in return, then it might be quick. But if you are doing it for someone who is not very experienced or is not paying very much per lead, then you could have to work quite a while to reach that $10,000 mark. Again, unlike the other strategies here, you probably have the least control over how much you make and when you actually make it if you're doing bird dogging or cold calling. And while I'm not a real estate agent, I did some research online, and a lot of experienced agents say that it's quite possible to make your first $10,000 within your first year as an agent. There, of course, is work involved, and it depends if you're going to be a listing agent or a buyer's agent, but agents typically make around 3% of the sales price of a property. And so properties they sell might be anywhere between $100,000 to $500,000 depending on your state, and so you could get to $10,000 pretty quickly. If any of these strategies are appealing to you, I've got a freebie pack down below that you can go get that will help you with whatever path you decide to take. It's got some scripts for talking to agents, it's got a PDF that will help you build out your business plan. All in all, it's a great way to help you get started and take action, and it's free, so you can go grab it in the description below. So now let's talk about risk. And I would say risk is made up of 3 things. It's your monetary risk, which most people think about. It's your legal risk, which more people should think about. And it's the risk to your reputation, which I haven't heard a lot of people talk about either. And with something like wholesaling, there's very low monetary risk because there's very low monetary contribution up front. But there is legal risk because there are different rules that regulate wholesaling depending on which state you're in. So you need to know those and you need to abide by them. And in terms of your reputation risk, for some reason, I found that other people in the real estate community, cash cash buyers, other investors, agents, they seem to be very harsh on wholesalers. And so as a wholesaler, if you're sending out bad deals or doing things in a shady way, there is a relatively high level of reputation risk if for some reason people don't approve of how you're doing things. So all in all, I would say still a low level of risk, but really pay attention. Just because there's not a lot of money on the line, there are other things that are still important to consider. With Airbnb arbitrage, I'm actually gonna put this as high risk. And the reason is you are signing on with a homeowner or with an apartment complex to pay the rent regardless of if your Airbnb makes enough money to cover it. You can't just go to them and say, sorry, my business didn't do well enough this month, I can't pay you the rent. You do not wanna deal with an eviction on your record because your Airbnb business didn't go well. House flipping and rentals, I will also say, have a high level of risk. With house flipping, you are taking on the risk of needing to get the house into livable condition before you can profit from it. And so if something's going wrong, if things keep breaking or the roof falls in, you have to fix it in order to make money from that property. If you walk away, you were just at a complete loss. And so a lot of times people have to keep putting money in and just keep hoping that they'll be able to get the money back out. So that's a difficulty with house flipping. With rentals, unfortunately, tenants can destroy your property. And then you'll have to, again, put more money in, and so you can start making money from it as well. There are still also the legal and reputation considerations with house flipping and with rentals, especially because you're in charge of the house that somebody and their family is going to be living in, and that's probably the biggest responsibility of all. Bird dogging and cold calling, as you've guessed, relatively low risk because there's really not much that you're in charge of. You're performing a task and then someone else is taking it from there. And then as a real estate agent, there are laws and rules that you have to abide by to keep your license. But in general, there's not a huge amount of risk in terms of losing money. Because again, you're not putting a ton of money in up front, and you're not really responsible for if the deal goes through or not. It's not like you have money on the line if something fails. All in all, I hope this gives you an honest look at some of the different ways to make money with real estate investing. Again, you can get the link to my free resource pack down in the description, and YouTube thinks this video is going to be perfect for you to watch next.